When I began to study apologetics, and I found out that some of my favorite apologists were old Earth Creationists, I had like this little panic. But I had to assess it biblically. And what I discovered was that there's a big misunderstanding in the church. Do you have to believe that the earth was made in 6 consecutive days?
Yeah.
To be an Orthodox Christian?
That's such a great question. So I look at helpful summaries, again, of even like the Nicene Creed. I believe in God the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth. Okay, so what is there about creation? In the early church, the idea of 6 24-hour days is a very debated issue. And the emphasis seems to be that God created, that he's the source of all creation, and that nothing created doesn't come from him, that everything comes from him. And a belief in a historical Adam and Eve. And these are the truly vital beliefs that the church has identified. I like the Belgic Confession, which, has an extended discussion about creation issues. It's a very helpful confession about creation. The Westminster Confession is the one confession that includes, in the space of 6 days, God created the heavens and the earth. And, we could get into a discussion about what the framers of the Westminster Confession meant by that. That's a whole conversation. But to me, that's a denominational distinctive. It's a part of the Westminster Confession is the confessional summary of Presbyterians. And so that's a conversation. I really think the Presbyterian Church in America about 15 years ago did a wonderful study committee on summarizing what they saw as the essentials, the core beliefs when it comes to creation. I think they did a really good job. Westminster Seminary, around in that same time frame, about 15 years ago, came out with a very nice summary that I would look at as being helpful. And neither of those bodies looked at the 24 hours as being the primary essential. Rather, the emphasis was on the source and the historical Adam and Eve as really being foundational. So that's kind of how I've thought that through, just looking at it from, what have Christians historically identified. Now, we can have the conversation about the details and how all that works. Again, that's a Bible study. That's a conversation about how we interpret the record of nature and how those two realms intersect. Very robust discussion we can have around all of that.
Yeah. And I think, too, there are a lot of misunderstandings among Christians. And again, I'm just speaking for myself because this was kind of what I thought. Nobody ever told me growing up, if you don't believe that the creation was 6 consecutive 24-hour days, then, that's heresy. Nobody ever said that to me, but I sort of caught that. And so when I began to study apologetics, and I found out that some of my favorite apologists were old Earth Creationists, I had like this little panic. But I had to assess it biblically. And what I discovered was that there's a big misunderstanding in the church. A lot of, I think, people who grew up with that sort of caught worldview are under the impression that if somebody believes that the earth was created in a longer period of time, then, now notice I haven't used the word literal, because old Earth Creationists and young Earth Creationists both take that account literally.
Yes.
They believe it's 6 literal days.
Yeah.
Now, it's the interpretation of what the word day means that there's the disagreement.
Whether it's 6 literal 24-hour days or 6 literal long periods of time.
Yes, epochs of time, or if there was space between 6 literal days, all of those kinds of questions. But they believe in a literal historical Adam and Eve. They believe that the creation story, of course, has poetic
real history.
It's real history. It has poetic language, of course, but it's actual history.
It reflects real events.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the third view then would be more of the theistic evolutionary view, which would pretty much, without a lot of gymnastics, you don't have a historical Adam and Eve. And so in my view, and you can give your thoughts on this too, like I think that's a wrong view. I think that's a hill I would die on. But at the same time, I also believe someone could be saved and not believe in a historical Adam and Eve. And that, in my view, would be a matter of discipleship. It would be, like you said, a Bible study. And even if we could disagree, that might be important enough to me to not go to a church that teaches that. But it's important for us to, I mean, we're getting in a lot of nuance here, but I think that's important because we don't want to just throw our brothers and sisters overboard.
Yeah.
But also not say, well, it's not important. It's very important because if you don't have a literal Adam and Eve, you don't have the gospel, really. Like Romans 4 just falls apart.
Yeah. You said a lot there. So let me kind of just touch on a couple of points and disclose my personal persuasion is that I'm an old Earth creationist.
Mm-hmm. And I don't take a position.
Okay.
So that's my official.
All right. So I think for me, after 2.5 decades of working in that realm, and having a lot of Bible study and working with scientists, I'm of the persuasion that old Earth creationism is probably correct. Now, I could get to heaven and be totally wrong. I'm cool with that, And but when I share my faith with a non-Christian, I share it from that point of view. So I do believe that Genesis is real history. I believe when I say historic Adam and Eve, I believe they were the first two humans created. Yes. That's what I mean by that.
Special creation.
Yeah, miraculously created. I don't believe in theistic evolution. I don't believe in God-guided evolution. I believe in miraculous interventionism. Mm-hmm. But I am persuaded that the earth is old. It's not thousands of years old. It's billions of years old. So that's kind of how I've worked that out at this point in my journey. But to your question about theistic evolution, I think that these are all conversations about denominational distinctives, but when we get to theistic evolution, we start venturing more into the realm of what I would say is core ideas, that a historical Adam and Eve do seem to be a necessity from a New Testament perspective. Yeah. If I look at Jesus's genealogy in the Gospel of Luke, it traces it back to Adam.
That's right.
So it would seem to imply that he's a real person. Mm-hmm. When I look at Paul's case for salvation, he compares Adam to Jesus, both in Romans and in 1 Corinthians. And when I look at 2 Peter, he understands the first humans and the flood as being real historical events, not just mythology, ancient Near Eastern mythology. So I think that when we get into the realm of theistic evolution, it's a bit more problematic.
I agree.
And that can become, for some people, in some cases, a gateway or an on-ramp to more progressive ideas and progressive Christianity. Because I've never known a progressive Christian who doesn't also embrace theistic evolution.
Yeah, or even Darwinian evolution.
Yeah.
It's really, even some would call it a pillar. Some progressive Christians call the acceptance of a Darwinian type of evolution or maybe a theistic evolution as foundational. It's foundational to their doctrine because they reject the fall. Yeah. They reject the idea that there was this ontological fall where this sin nature was inherited by humans, generally speaking.
So those are all what I would consider to be core beliefs.
Yes. Yeah, so it's very, very, I agree with you. It's very important. It's very interlinked. Could a Christian be confused about that? Yes, but it would be one of those things where you would want to bring help and correction there because I think we're on the same page about that.